tonight for one of the 87 last events for Chad as head of this organization. His goodbye tour is like Bruce Springsteen going on forever. I had to mention him. I'm from New Jersey. So I know a lot of folks right now are focused on 2020, the 2020 people running for President of the United States from the Democratic Party. That's the best joke I have tonight, guys. You should have laughed at that one. But I just want to take a moment to go way back and celebrate the folks in this room. It's this community that helped to mobilize tens of thousands of voters around the country in 70 different races in 23 different states. This community helped to register tens of thousands of voters, endorse more women and more people of color than ever before in history. You helped flip the House of Representatives. And in 2018, more LGBTQ Americans ran and were elected to public office than ever before in the United States history. And so, folk here prove that love doesn't just win at the Supreme Court, love wins elections. And so I want to thank Chad for that leadership. Chad is really, in my life, one of the more inspiring figures. He is somebody that understands the urgencies we have of this moment. He understands that power, as a great leader once said, Frederick Douglass, power concedes nothing without a demand. That we must be continuing to push and fight and try to make change, because change doesn't just happen, it has to be made to happen. Time is not a neutral force. And we have a moment now where there are outrageous things happening. A moral vandalism is coming from this White House and this administration. Demagogues in the White House and the administration are working systematically to try to undermine and dismantle LGBTQ rights, voting rights, civil rights, women's rights, from the president's discriminatory and un-American ban on transgender Americans serving in the military, to the Department of Justice's refusal to protect LGBTQ Americans from employment discrimination, to Betsy DeVos's failure to protect our transgender students. Some of you have seen what's recently coming. It's happening right now at our border. Just last week in New Mexico, reports came out documenting the rampant systemic abuse and discrimination of transgender and gay individuals being detained at a privately run immigrant detention facility. Reports from inside that center said trans women being detained at the facility who requested continuation of their hormone therapy were denied and told, "This isn't your home." Well, I say that this is not just inhumane, it's just not unacceptable. But like the rest of this administration's postures and policies towards LGBTQ Americans, we all must have a choice to make. You see, in life, there is a choice to make. You can either accept things as they are or take responsibility for changing. I can't tell you that this has been 2 years of my life, or now over 2 years, with this administration that are two of the most hopeful years of my life. Now, why am I saying that? It's not just because of the guy who is in the office. How can I be hopeful about that? No, because I learned in the inner city of Newark, New Jersey, where I live. I learned from a woman on the 5th floor of the projects who was my tenant leader. I eventually moved in, but when I moved into the building I lived in, I found out that her son was murdered in the lobby of the building in which I lived. And I couldn't understand why she still stayed in those buildings. She and I made enough money, we could have lived anywhere. Why would she stay in the buildings where her son was murdered? And I'll never forget her saying to me, she goes, "I stay here because I'm in charge of Homeland Security." You know, she didn't wait for a title, she didn't wait for a presidential appointment. She took responsibility every day. She taught me that hope is the active conviction that despair will never have the last word. And so here we have a reality in our country that is unacceptable. Not just the actions of this administration, but the persistent injustices still going on. I've heard other speakers talk about them. From the purpose of the Equality Act to make this nation once and for all free and equal. The outrage is that we still live in a country where you can be fired just because you are gay and have no legal recourse in most of our states. That's outrageous. We live in a nation right now where the overwhelming plurality of our young people who are homeless are LGBTQ youth, where LGBTQ youth report missing school at alarming rates for fear of their own safety. And the question is how are we going to respond? Because that is despair, but we have so much power. I tell you, when the Muslim ban came, I ran out to Dulles Airport, and I'll never forget that I came out to fight to try to get some folks that were being detained from other countries. I fight to get them some legal representation, and I was blown away when I came in because the concourse was full of people not letting despair have the last word. Hundreds of people chanting and singing American songs, patriotic songs, and then when people came out of the gates, Muslims coming into our country, people broke out into cheers. There were guys with kippahs on and sitzahs cheering Muslim families coming in. I ran back to the Senate floor, and later I saw Joe Donnelly, and I told him what I saw, how amazing this was. And he goes, Cory, we did the same thing in Indiana. I went out to Indianapolis Airport, and we were cheering and hugging people coming off of planes, except there were no international flights. We were just hugging people from Detroit coming off the plane. We are Americans. This nation has never, ever yet been that ideal of a beloved community. We were founded in this country with bigotry written into our founding documents. Blacks were fractions of human beings, Native Americans, savages, women not referred to at all, but every generation of Americans, not the ones in Congress or the Senate or the White House, every generation of Americans from Stonewall to Seneca to Selma said, we are going to change this nation. We are not going to wait for someone else to do it. It wasn't Strom Thurmond coming to the Senate floor one day and saying, it's about time those Negro people have some rights. No. It was Americans with the force of their will demanding that this country live up to its promise, and now we have more work to do. Demagogues have risen. Demagogues have risen before. We've seen them from Father Conklin with his anti-Semitism to an entire political party called the Know Nothings to condemn immigration of Irish and Italians. It was James Baldwin that once said in a letter to another great activist when she was imprisoned, he wrote her this letter and said, if they come for you in the morning, then they're going to come for me at night. And so as long as there's one child that's being abused and bullied because of who they are, as long as there's a Department of Education that's rolling back protections for LGBTQ kids, as long as there is a president who is banning patriots from serving in the military because they're transgender, then we all have a collective responsibility not to accept things as they are, but to take responsibility for changing them. I want to end in honor of Chad because I'm telling you, this brother has invited me to speak at a lot of HRC events over the last 7 years. I love him for it. I had parents that told me I am here because of the folks that were willing to march and sweat and bleed for me. And they were Black Americans and brown Americans and white Americans. They told me they were gay Americans and straight Americans. And I know that we all now are doing the work that will make our ancestors proud. People that dreamed that this nation would one day, we haven't yet, one day live up to its charter that we will be a nation of liberty and justice for all. And so as I did in one of my earliest times that Chad invited me to speak, in honor of him, I will do some spoken word from a guy far more talented than me named Langston Hughes. And Langston Hughes wrote this poem where he challenged us to live our commitment to this country, where he challenged us to understand that you can't just sing songs of America. You can't just say pledges. You have to pay for that with your work. And we are in that moral moment now. We are another generation that will be tested to live up to the call of this country or not. He asked folks to swear an oath, and I tell you the end of his poem. He said, Langston wrote in a poem published the year my dad was born. He said, "Oh, let America be America again, the land that never has been yet, but yet must be. The land where everyone is free." I'm going to take a liberty here. The poor man, the Indian, and the LGBT. Who made America? Whose sweat and blood, whose faith and pain, whose hand at the foundry, whose plow in the rain, must make our mighty dream live again. Oh yes, I say it plain. America never was America to me, and yet I swear this oath, America will be. Our country is calling. Our ancestors are standing in watch. Generations yet unborn are hoping and depending upon what we do in this moral moment. We are on the center stage of this country. The nation's future hangs in our balance. Let us swear the oath that we will stand up and make this country what we say we are. A nation where everyone is equal under the law. A nation where everyone has liberty and justice. A nation where we become truly, for all of our children, a nation of love. Thank you.